Snow White, and she ordered a huntsman to take the young princess deep into the forest and leave her to die. Trembling with fear, Snow White stumbled through the forest, dodging wolves and other dangers until she came upon a small cottage. There, she met 7 friendly dwarves: Dog, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey. Snow White quickly became friends with the dwarves, who welcomed her into their home and took care of her. Snow White quickly adapted to life in the cottage, helping the dwarves with their daily chores and making their home a warm and cozy place. She learned about the joys of nature, spending hours in the forest, gathering wildflowers and singing to the birds. And the dwarves, in turn, taught Snow White about the importance of hard work and friendship. Years passed, and Snow White lived a happy life in the cottage, surrounded by the love and laughter of her friends. But she knew that her stepmother was still out there, and she lived in fear of her wrath. One day, her worst fears came true. Her stepmother discovered her hiding place, disguised as an old woman, and offered Snow White a poisoned apple. Snow White, not realizing the danger, took a bite and fell into a deep sleep. The 7 dwarves, heartbroken by Snow White's fate, placed her in a glass coffin and kept watch over her, hoping that one day a true love's kiss would awaken her from her slumber. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, a handsome prince was on a quest to find the most beautiful woman in the world. He had heard of Snow White's beauty and grace and was determined to find her. The prince traveled far and wide, visiting kingdoms and cities, searching for the one who would become his bride. One day, while riding through the forest, he came upon the cottage in the woods and was immediately struck by Snow White's beauty. He leaned in and pressed his lips to Snow White's, breaking the spell and bringing her back to life. Snow White and the prince were overjoyed to finally be reunited, and they fell deeply in love. However, Snow White's stepmother was still a threat, and the prince knew that she would stop at nothing to keep them apart. He made a plan to protect Snow White, and with the help of the 7 dwarves, he staged a grand ball in the kingdom, inviting the entire kingdom to attend. Snow White and the prince danced the night away, and the queen, believing that Snow White was finally out of reach, left the kingdom in a fit of rage. Snow White and the prince were married in a grand ceremony, surrounded by their friends and loved ones. They ruled the kingdom with wisdom and kindness, always putting the needs of their people first. They made the kingdom a place of peace and prosperity, where everyone was treated fairly and with respect. And the 7 dwarves, who had become Snow White's closest friends, remained by her side, always ready to help. Snow White and the prince had many children, and their family grew strong and united. The kingdom prospered, and the people loved their rulers, who were always there to listen to their needs and help in any way they could. As the years passed, Snow White and the prince grew old together, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. They had lived a long and happy life, filled with love, laughter, and adventure. And the people of the kingdom never forgot the young princess who had become their queen, and the prince who had saved her from a cursed sleep. In their later years, Snow White and the prince would often retire to their private garden, where they would sit together, holding hands and reminiscing about their adventures. Snow White would tell the prince of her life in the cottage with the 7 dwarves, and he would tell her of his travels, of the many kingdoms he had visited, and of the beautiful princess he had fallen in love with. And the prince would listen to Snow White's stories, never tiring of her words, and never forgetting the true love that had brought them together all those years ago. And Snow White would listen to the prince, always in awe of his courage and wisdom, and always grateful for the life they had shared together. In the end, Snow White and the prince passed away, leaving behind a legacy of love, kindness, and happiness. And their kingdom was forever changed, a place where love and kindness had triumphed over jealousy and greed. And their story was passed down from generation to generation, a tale of true love and adventure that would never be forgotten.